Thanks for joining us for this recording of our Families in Global Transition 2014 concurrent session, The Trailing Spouse Redefined. I'm Evelyn Simpson.
And I'm Louise Wiles.
We're co-directors of Simpson Wiles and Associates and co-creators of the Thriving Abroad support platform, empowering expat partners to create purpose and fulfillment for themselves as they relocate around the world. This is how trailing spouses are often portrayed in the press. According to them, we're a pretty spoiled bunch who do nothing but socialize and drink gin. Today, though, we're going to draw on our research and our experience in working with expat partners to talk about, first, what's changed and what hasn't changed for expat partners, why today's expat partners have an unprecedented opportunity to redefine the role of trailing spouse whilst they're abroad, and last, the keys to making it happen. First, let's get the discussion of nomenclature out of the way, because it's part of the issue. Not the biggest part, for sure, but it's one that gets a lot of people off to a bad start. We know there's been discussion about it at FIGT in prior years, but the term still lingers. Trailing spouse. The Oxford English Dictionary defines trail as to be drawn along behind someone or something. It makes us think of this guy. But this is the 21st century. Few of us are trailing, and many of us aren't spouses. We're part of the decision to move, and actually, in many ways, we're leading, as we're often the ones who make the move happen, and we're the ones who build family lives in our new homes. Whilst we think that some label is useful, as we're a group with a somewhat common set of needs, it would be good if the label was more empowering, or at least neutral. Of course, there are lots of possibilities, but most of them either lack catchiness or they're not easily adopted within the HR community. So for today, we're just going to use the term expat partner.
If we look back at our predecessors in the early to mid-20th century, a comparison between their lives and ours is a bit like these then and now photos of Hong Kong. So much has changed, yet somehow it still looks the same. We know that it's still difficult for expat partners to work whilst overseas. Our career choice and the accompanying partner survey, a survey of over 300 expat partners in 55 countries, showed that although almost 80% of expat partners worked before relocating, only 44% worked after, and only 16% of those full-time. Unlike our predecessors, most of whom came with the expectation that they wouldn't work and weren't working prior to relocating, we want to work, or at least 78% of us do. And thanks to the stellar work of the Permits Foundation, more and more countries are allowing expat partners to work. But as we discovered in our survey, it is far more complicated than whether or not a work visa is available. There are employability issues, such as language, network, qualification, equivalence and pay, and cultural receptiveness. Then, if you can get over those hurdles, there are the practical and logistical issues, such as access to reliable childcare, flexibility, so that you can be there for your children when your partner's working long hours or travelling abroad. And then there are choice factors that also come into the equation. Some people do want to be there for the children because no one else can be. Extended family are all living in other countries. And some partners actually want to enjoy the freedom of not having to work for a while and decide to sit back. And then there are others who decide not to work because they have uncertainty about the future and the length of stay and whether it's worth putting all the effort to find a job only to then move on very soon after. In the old days of expatriatism, expat partners expected to play a role in their partner's job, and their companies expected that they would do so too. Thanks to the Expat Archive Centre in the Netherlands, we've been reading expat partner accounts of expat life in the early and mid-20th century. This quote shows the role that partners' wives often played. Though it's not said specifically, there's a feeling that the supporting role they were expected to play was both acknowledged and valued. Of course, on some level, they would have needed more support than families today, as many aspects of their lives would have been much tougher than ours. Let's face it, in comparison to the conditions that some of our predecessors endured, our issues are truly first world. But although companies have backed away from supporting supporting partners, as the world has become a smaller place, and partners are more likely to lead independent lives prior to relocating, those same companies still have expectations that there will be a non-working spouse or partner at home to take care of tasks which would otherwise require the working spouse to take time off work. But enough of labels and expectations. The huge change between now and then is opportunity. Expats have the opportunity to redefine the role, to create their own lives and find their own fulfillment whilst living abroad.
In the 21st century, our lives as expat partners are transformed compared to those of our predecessors. We can travel, communicate, and work in a way that expat partners a century ago couldn't even dream of. When they moved, they often spent several weeks just getting to their destination by ship. Home leaves were infrequent and a major life event. No quick trip home to visit a sick relative or see children who remained in their home country at school. Communication was first by letter and then with the occasional very expensive telegram. Letters could take months to reach their destination. Our ability to communicate has been transformed by telecommunications and the internet. It's hard for us to imagine living overseas and not being connected to family and friends at home and around the world. Telecommunications and the internet have also transformed every aspect of an international move. Think of how much information is available to us before we even set foot in the country in which we'll live. Perhaps most importantly, it's transformed the possibilities for expat partners. We can learn about the opportunities to volunteer and study. Freelance jobs and portable careers become a possibility. We may be able to continue with our careers, and if we can't, it enables us to maintain our networks and even sometimes our qualifications whilst we're away from home. Let's take our own very 21st century business partnership as an example. We met because we both responded to a question on a LinkedIn HR group. The questioner asked a question that went something like this. Expat partners say they want to work, but then you get them visas and they don't get jobs. What's all that about? Do they even want to work? Not surprisingly, we both responded rather vehemently, explaining that it was a much more complicated answer than a yes/no. However, in looking for quotables for our answers, we both realized that there weren't any. So we got in touch directly, and before we knew it, had agreed to work on creating our own survey. Over the course of the next several months, we blew through our broadband allowances, talking on Skype, sharing data and analysis, and talking about our respective aspirations for business. By May 2012, when we met in person for the first time, we already knew each other well enough to suggest combining our businesses and co-investing. We now speak almost daily. Sometimes we speak to each other more than we speak to our respective husbands, who are, of course, usually traveling. Our business is a truly 21st century one. Our training programs are hosted online, and we use a variety of online tools to communicate with our clients. We use service providers around the world, including a web designer in Ireland and a virtual assistant in Idaho. And we've worked with clients on nearly every continent. But if you know of someone on Antarctica who'd be interested in our help, please tell them to get in touch because we'd love to add that to the list.
So how do we help accompanying partners to exploit this opportunity? One of the lessons that we learned from the Career Choice and the Accompanying Partner survey is that sponsoring organisations are probably not going to provide the solution in the short term. Our survey showed that while 70% of partners thought that companies should provide support in the form of life or career coaching, only 17% of partners actually received it. Now, we applaud the companies who've realised that partner support beyond settling in support, language and cross-cultural training can make a critical difference to a family's ability to thrive in their new environment. We also believe that dual career issues, demographics and the war for talent has the potential to change sponsor organisations' views towards supporting accompanying partners. Helping companies do it right is certainly an important part of our raison d'etre. But in the meantime, we encourage partners to take ownership of their own experience and find a way to build thriving new lives for themselves whilst overseas. So as we say here, don't be a passenger on someone else's journey, make it your own. And here's what our Career Choice and Accompanying Partner survey told us about expat partners' levels of fulfillment. We found that 53% of accompanying partners said that they were very fulfilled or fulfilled, which is an awesome statistic because it does mean that more than half of partners are pretty happy with what they're doing overseas. But it also means that nearly half, 47%, are either neutral and therefore pretty ambivalent or unfilled by their experience abroad. And this is a warning to companies and organisations because if they want engaged employees, then they need their partners to be engaged as well. And if they're unfilled and unhappy, then they're likely to want to continue perhaps or certainly renew their stay abroad. Now, when we broke down the statistics of this survey, we noticed that nearly 70% of the working population described themselves are very fulfilled or fulfilled, while only 48% of the non-working population did. And this made us think. And at the other end of the scale, we found that 21% of the population described themselves as unfilled or very unfulfilled. Now that's more than a fifth of expat partners who really aren't very happy with their lot. In more detail, we discovered that only 10% of working population were unfulfilled or very unfulfilled, but 28% of the non-working population applied that description to themselves. And we also turned that statistics on its head and realised that of the unfulfilled and very unfulfilled population, a stunning 79% were not working. Now, whilst we did not explore correlations, that data suggested to us that work provides an expat partners with fulfillment that perhaps isn't so easily replicated outside of the normal working environment. So we started to learn more about what actually makes people feel fulfilled in life.
That brought us to the science of happiness and the body of work collectively in positive psychology. We were particularly drawn to the work of Martin Seligman. His PERMA model of flourishing identifies 5 elements: positive mindset, engagement, relationships, meaning and purpose and accomplishment. We realized that the expat partner experience can challenge each and every one of those elements on a fundamental level. Mindsets can be challenged by the constant battering taken as partners adjust to life in a new culture. Partners often don't feel engaged in the assignment, nor do they initially feel engaged in their new country and culture. Relationships are transformed by distance or by changing dynamics such as financial dependence. Long-held constructions of meaning, purpose, and accomplishment are broken down and not necessarily replaced by anything else. Meaning and purpose are significantly altered when partners can no longer pursue careers or hobbies and interests that are fundamental to who they are. And those are replaced by providing support to family members, which can be all-consuming, but in the early days often leaves the expat partner with a gap once everyone is settled. Sense of accomplishment takes a beating from the start of the assignment. When you arrive, you're unconsciously incompetent. That is, you don't know what you don't know. Unfortunately, for most expat partners, the daily challenges quickly make us painfully aware of what we don't know, and we become consciously incompetent. And we surveyed our expat partner online coffee group, as well as the followers on our Thriving Abroad Facebook page, as to what their biggest challenges were when they moved overseas. And this slide just shows a sample of the most common answers. So how can expat partners turn this experience that challenges their very identity to the core and every element of their well-being, how can they redefine not just the term trailing spouse, but the experience that's associated with it?
Well, at thrivingabroad.com, we identify 4 steps in the relocation process.